Thank you for joining us today on Earthfile. Welcome to the program. I'm Ayola Kasim. Deforestation has become a severe issue due to Nigeria's rapidly growing population, coupled with the increasing demand for timber, firewood, and agricultural land. Nigeria is one of the countries with highest deforestation rates in the world. But there was a time it was one of those working hard at preserving nature. It has been reported that as things stand today, only less than 4% of the country's untouched forest cover is left. More frightening is the fact that 1.5 million trees are felled every day owing to illegal logging. About 484 plant species are also threatened with extinction. We'll start today's program with my recent conversation with Philip Hall, a British environmentalist who set up the Sambisa Forest Reserve in 1975. Do stay with us.
More danger here for you. Are you ready?
It absolutely startles me. It even startles me coming here to the Lekki Conservation Centre to see the impact, because this has become an ecological island now. You know, it's surrounded by buildings, and hence the reason it is all flooded now. The water has nowhere to go. So it's no longer a diverse rainforest, which is what it was when we set it up in 1989. It's now become a swamp forest, as you've seen. So the diversity of birds. This morning, we hardly saw anything, which is quite alarming, you know, but that's because of the change of the habitat. You know, there are not the food trees, you know, for birds to feed on anymore. So everything is changing.
Indeed, everything has changed since Phil first settled in Borno State in 1972. Although he is now back in the United Kingdom after living in Nigeria for about 41 years, he still visits regularly. For him, Nigeria is an amazing country. For an ornithologist, he helped set up the Lekki Conservation Foundation in Lagos. He was also here on the 18th of February 1989 when Prince Philip laid the foundation stone of the Lekki Conservation Centre. The Duke also commissioned the centre after its completion.
He laid the foundation stone, which is over there, of course. At the time, we were looking actually in the Savannah area for the building, but then because of logistics, we moved the building to here. And I was privileged that I took the Duke of Edinburgh all around Nigeria for 5 days. And as a result of his visit, we established conservation projects in Cross River, in the Hadeja-Ungaru area, and this place as well. So it was a most successful visit, and it was a real privilege, as you can appreciate, to accompany him all over the place. I mean, when he laid this foundation stone here, his first remark was that everywhere he goes, he lays foundation stones, and then he comes back and nothing has ever been done. And that's why when he came back in 2003, it was so good to be able to show him what we had done in this one space. But that is very much the case, you know.
Before working with the NCF, Phil had worked for 15 years for the government, during which time he set up several nature reserves, including the Sambisa Forest. Unfortunately, today, it is being remembered as the area Boko Haram kept the missing Chibok girls.
Borno State in the 1970s was what I would have considered the most peaceful place on the planet. You could never have foreseen that sort of problem arising. We set up Sambisa entirely as an area. We had a big herd of elephants in those days in Borno, 350 elephants. And that was set up as a dry season refuge for the elephants. And with protection, that reserve became really interesting. All you need to do is give protection. It's amazing the different animal species that propagate. And that was a fabulous reserve right through until the 1990s when this whole Boko Haram thing began.
And now you don't even, I don't see you even going near that area at all.
No, I was hoping last year to go back to Maiduguri, but I would never go out of Maiduguri, obviously. It's not safe. No road out of Maiduguri is safe anymore. I used to go to Lake Chad all the time, I had a research project on the shores of Lake Chad in the extreme northeast corner of Borno State at Malamfatari. That is totally a no-go area now. Now, I know Lake Chad and the islands probably better than anybody. Not the people that live there, obviously. And again, they were all peaceful. I used to camp on the islands of Lake Chad in days gone by. Not anymore.
But he still hopes. He hopes to visit Sambisa someday.
There's nothing that would give me greater pleasure than to be able to go back up to all these areas. I mean, you know, we had a really good base there, and that even after I left Borno State, we did several expeditions up to Lake Chad, ornithological ones again, I might add. But, you know, with researchers from all over Europe came, and we had a base at Malamfatari in those days. And no, I have a good base there. We set up a school in Maiduguri, which is now the biggest school. That was my wife, and that's the biggest school in Maiduguri now, and it's still going strong. And we had intended to go back for that, but of course there was a problem last May that prevented us from going to Bornu. There was something that happened in Kaduna, which you may remember, and we were told for security reasons that we shouldn't go. So, but I'll get back before I leave this planet.
Over the years, deforestation has posed a consistent threat to biodiversity in Nigeria. In 2010, the country had 10.9 mega hectares of natural forest, extending over 12% of its land area. In 2022, it lost 105 kilohectares of natural forest, equivalent to 69.7 metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. This rapid decline has left conservation experts worried about the impact of the looming extinction of some endangered species on the Nigerian economy. They believe the extinction of endangered species could rob the country of both ecological and economic benefits. As Nigeria still contends with high unemployment rate, countries like Kenya, South Africa, Tanzania, Namibia, Uganda and Botswana, through wildlife conservation, are creating employment and increasing the gross domestic product of their countries.
Everybody knows about the gorillas in Cross River State. They're not a tourism asset as such, but it's an important biological asset for the country. And there is protection there, but there's probably even more protection that is needed. You know, there is still not, we don't generate a lot of support for conservation in this country. We don't have conservation tourism, as you probably know. People, if you have money, and most influential Nigerians, if they have money, where do they want to go? London. Yeah, they're not interested. Whereas for Europeans and Americans, we come in the opposite direction. We come to Africa because we have this genuine interest in seeing wildlife. And that's where we have to get to the level in this country that that awareness is created, that interest is created, and that comes from environmental education, which is why what NCF is doing is so important. NCF, their biggest role and most important role is advocacy, and they're doing a tremendous job there with government. For on-the-ground projects, the nuts and bolts of conservation, an organisation like ANI is to the forefront because they're on the ground training rangers, putting in the necessary infrastructure to protect those areas properly. And then in Cross River you've got an organised Pandrillis you've probably heard about. They're doing a very good conservation programme for the drills up in the north of Cross River State. You've got WCS, also based in Cross River. Their main focus is the Afi Mountains and Yankari. And Yankari, again, we provide support to Yankari still, all these years on. And of course I used to be involved in the management of Yankari years ago. And that, at one stage, was the most important conservation area in Nigeria. And that generated a lot of interest throughout the 70s and 80s. But all that seems to have been diluted, you know. And it's not been helped by the problems that we have. I mean, kidnappings and everything up in the north. That puts off a lot of people visiting these areas at the moment. But the resource is still there and needs to be conserved. It needs to be protected. It shouldn't just be seen as a cash cow for the future. It's got to be seen as something that's important for the country as a whole. And that's the values that you've got to inculcate.
While the tourism industry can create opportunities for preserving the endangered wildlife, human activities like housing development and agriculture reduce the habitat of native organisms, so risking their extinction.
If we don't get that message, where the whole food resource in this country, the whole environment is going to be destroyed. As we said, with this increasing population, you've got a lot of hungry mouths that you've got to feed. And destroying the environment is going to affect the climate and is going to affect everything else. Something has to give. And therefore, if we're going to tackle climate change, and that of course has an impact on everything, it's got to start with small beginnings. And that is actually conservation, and that's what makes conservation so important.
And can we get it right?
Yeah, of course you can, but it has to have the political will. And there are very few governors in this country that have had that political will. I will say that in days gone by, Donald Duke in Cross River did a great job. Might not have been to everybody's cup of tea, but he established Obadoo, of which we established the forestry reserves on Obadoo, and we still support that. But the successors have done the complete opposite. They've destroyed that very fabric, that very base. And this is what I was saying about Obaseki and Edo. He's doing a great job now. We would not have got this far with the Komu and with forestry without his backing. But take Yankari, which should be the jewel in Nigeria's crown. The government, since the last 20 years, have just not been interested. They spend a lot of money building up the whole infrastructure there, and then they destroy it. Instead of maintaining it because it's been done, they just pull no resources into that at all. And that's what's happening everywhere.
Omo Forest, a 1,325 square kilometers of land, is a protected government reserve, and in 1997 was named a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, which also makes it a learning area for the promotion of solutions which reconciles the conservation of biodiversity with its sustainable use. But for those doing the conservation work, it is a tough task. Human activities are destroying the forest, making the flora and fauna here disappear faster than they can replenish.
We are not connecting what we are doing with the environment, because if somebody knows that you are going into a pristine forest to clear the environment, to clear the forest, you know that we're having a pristine habitat to go and clear the forest. If you know that by doing that you are going to expose us, but people just want to get the immediate gain from it. And by getting the immediate gain, they pocket it, they don't care what happens afterwards. But 2-3 years down the line, people start dying or things start changing, people start living uncomfortable life. Then we start spending more money to put on our ACs, start spending more money to buy fuel in our generators and things like that. So it doesn't make sense. At the end of the day, it's a zero-sum affair, because the money we derive from the environment, by destroying the environment, we will now pay to provide the services that the environment is providing for us, albeit even ineffectively.
This is happening despite Nigeria's Conservation Foundation's efforts. Since April 2018, the NCF has been campaigning for the protection of the forest. By so doing, they are saving the home of the elephant in Omo Forest Reserve. But they have a very difficult task. Many have become rich exploiting the forest, and they are not willing to give it all up.
We can conquer whatever it is if we are determined to. And that is why also we normally advocate for carrot and stick approach, because there are some people, we have laws, and that's why we have laws to be able to protect, because the human nature will always be deviant. So if they are deviant, you use the stick approach. But the people who are not deviant, then use the carrot approach. So it has to be a carrot and stick approach to ensure that we have this balance. So people who need to be whipped into line for those who are not doing what they ought to do. That's why there are laws. Laws are there to protect us, to guide us so that we don't self-destruct. It's not only about the environment. That's why you cannot murder your neighbor. those laws are there to protect each and everyone, to protect me from you, to protect you from me. But there are some deviants, and when they do what they are not supposed to do, the law is there to take its course. And that is why we should always try to see what we can do to ensure that we are protecting the environment, and we are protecting the environment to protect us, and also protecting ourselves from ourselves, so that we don't destroy the environment, so that the environment don't come around to bite us.
From 2001 to 2021, Nigeria lost 1.14 million hectares of tree cover, equivalent to 11% decrease in tree cover since 2000 and equal to 587 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions, according to Global Forest Watch, a platform that provides data and monitors forests, cutting down trees for logging, opening up farmland, or to feed energy demand for a growing population is putting pressure on Nigeria's natural forests. The United Nations says its decade on ecosystem restoration provides a unique opportunity to transform food, fiber and feed production systems to meet the needs of the 21st century and to eradicate poverty, hunger and malnutrition. Reviving ecosystems and other natural solutions could contribute over 1/3 of the total climate mitigation needed by 2030. Restoration can also curb the risk of mass species extinctions and future pandemics. Agroforestry alone could increase food security for 1.3 billion people. The restoration of forest landscapes, farming, livestock and fish-producing ecosystems should primarily contribute to restoring them to a healthy and stable state, so that they are able to provide ecosystem services and support human needs for sustainable production and livelihoods. For example, around 1/3 of the world's farmland is degraded. About 87% of inland wetlands worldwide have disappeared since 1700. And 1/3 of commercial fish species are overexploited. Degradation is already affecting the well-being of an estimated 3.2 billion people. That is 40% of the world's population. Every single year, we lose ecosystem services worth more than 10% of our global economic output. If we can manage to reverse this trend, scientists say massive gains await us.
The thing is that by protecting and managing and restoring nature, you can make a difference to climate change. There was a paper published in Nature quite recently which essentially demonstrated that a contribution by protecting, managing, restoring nature can deliver something like 10 million gigatons of carbon dioxide. I have no idea how you conceptualize that, but it's a lot. And what they basically say is that if we are to increase the protection of our habitats important for carbon, if we improve the management of the land, and if we restore nature, then it's possible that we will reduce peak global temperature rises by about 0.1 and about 0.3 degrees centigrade. Now that doesn't sound a lot, but we're facing a crisis and we need to buy time to help the economies of the world wean themselves off fossil fuels and into renewable energy. So every little helps, which is why we're saying that we need to restore huge amounts of land and we need to improve the management of that land to help nature and the climate.
As a healthy biosphere underpins our economy, society and our existence, the message is it is our job to make sure it is protected.
It's all part, birds, mammals, they're all part of an integrated ecosystem. If you kill off one part, it's going to have a major impact on the overall environment. And it's these values that you've got to engender, particularly in the youth of today, because they're our future. And there are more and more people getting interested in the environment because they see the impacts they're facing. As I just said, droughts, shortage of water, floods, goes to all extremes, and that's climate change is all impacted by we're releasing too much CO2 in the atmosphere, which is causing, the Earth to heat up at an unprecedented rate. And you have to think of the future, otherwise there will not be a future for children, our grandchildren. And now is the time to start. we're talking already about a 1.5 degree increase. They're predicting it could be as high as 3.5 degrees in the next 10 years. Everybody is going to suffer, and that is not what we want. Mankind will not have a future unless we do something now, and that includes birds, mammals, the forest, everything.
As the triplets of Rio Convention, and these triplets are climate change, biodiversity, and desertification, because you see all these things play together, you know, one playing one role or the other and impacting on the other. So because of this, I refer to it as the triplets of Rio Convention. And that's, what is it all about? It has all been about the impact on humanity. How, if you don't think we're all struggling with the direct impact of climate change. We also know that when biodiversity is altered, we talked about the birds, the plants, the animals. Sometimes we do something not knowing that these things are helping our, humanity, our livelihood. Then you talk about desertification that is coming, destroying the areas, particularly in Nigeria here, which is part of, we are feeling the impact of what is coming up from the Sahel region. And we have seen how that has affected the farmers' headers clashes, and the drying up of Lake Chad. And of course, you see that we have the National Great Green Wall. And the reason we are doing that across 11 states, covering about 1,350 kilometers, is because it impacts strongly on what you refer to now as whatever effort we are making for livelihood. And do not forget that when this is so strong, it leads to forced migration, and with the security implication that I just talked about on that resolution.
The writers of the Nigerian Climate Change Act 2021 say it was drafted bearing in mind the peculiarities of problems in Nigeria and what works for us. A clear example is the establishment of the National Council on Climate Change, headed by the President.
Now we have a direction. Now we also have this National Council on Climate Change reporting, one, to the council when they meet, and then two, to the National Assembly committees. Such a thing never existed for an umbrella body that is there. You know, when I was speaking before, I talked about what I have coined to be peer jealousy, where individuals do not allow others, particularly peers. When you ask one peer or one minister or commissioner to be on top of others to drive a process, sometimes that person is sabotaged quietly, to a point where nothing comes out of it. But in this case, if Mr. President appointed you as a minister and you fail to do something that is intended to achieve the overall objective, Mr. President is at liberty to even remove you from that ministerial position. From that law, Section 26, we have provided that this climate change should be incorporated into our curriculum from primary school to the university. So when a government comes and focuses on this thing and gets the Minister of Education and Minister of Information to create the awareness, we are going to have the opportunity to move in the right direction. Awareness is required. We have a lot of youths who are rearing to go. They just need an opportunity and to be properly directed.
With the opportunities the Nigeria Climate Change Act presents, experts are saying its full implementation will usher in a new Nigeria built on the principles of sustainable, clean and green economic growth.
And without that government will, in this country, at the centre, where is that, drive and determination to maintain all these areas? It's not there. We're so hopeful that with this new government, we will have a minister that is genuinely interested in providing that backup. So our fingers are firmly crossed on that one.
Our program for the day. Thank you for watching. Our inbox Earthfile at channelstv.com is always available for your comments and your questions. From all of us here in Lagos, it's bye for now.